we have a number of people out there that are with universities and a lot of people that aren't. So what advice would you give other organizations looking for similar capabilities?
I think the advice that I give is, hey, you need a product like this and just get started with it. We implemented this, and I'm not kidding you, we had this implemented in a couple of hours. We had traffic flowing to the appliance. And what's nice about it, it's a network tap, so that means that we're duplicating the data. It has no impact on our current operational hardware or software. It's separately, so all the traffic gets mapped and duplicated to this appliance, and it's gathered, and we're really able to use that instantly. We are able to have business units and application staff. They're up and using it the next day. They log on. They can run reports. They can look at Session Manager. The only thing that we control centrally, and that's are the watch points. We define those watch points because of the certificates and keys that need to be coordinated with the watch points and the limitations on that. But I would say just get started and start using it and roll this out to your operational folks, your business units, and your application people. And I'd come back to and just add what the whole really thing that it will give your data centers a lot better transparency and the capability to measure your applications. So those were really big hitters for us.
Dana, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us. Now, you're going to stick around because there'll be some questions I know that people will have. So right now what we're going to do is turn things over to Doug Miller from BMC, and he's going to give you an overview of the BMC End User Experience Management solution.
Right. Thanks, Dick. And speaking of questions, so we asked Dana a few questions. If anybody who's attending has specific questions for Dana or for Dick or for myself, for that matter, about the EUEM product, you have a Q&A box in your WebEx session, so please just type a question in there, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can as we complete. I'm going to try to get through this overview very quickly, so we should have at least 10 or 15 minutes to try to answer some questions. So before I go straight into the product, I want to talk some about the rationale for why end-user experience management or watching end-user performance is so important. And as applications have moved more and more to the web, and the fact that the architecture has gotten more and more complex, so with app servers, web servers, database servers, off-premise servers, things in the cloud, things not in the cloud, it's really, really hard to measure just infrastructure to understand how the application is performing. I commend Dana for them anticipating that was going to be a problem and bringing in something ahead of time. We have lots and lots of customers who buy EUEM because of a problem. This chart came from a Forrester study, which actually shows that the user expectations for how long it's going to take a web page to load have pretty much halved every 3 years. So, in 2006 it was 4 seconds, in 2009 it was 2 seconds, in 2012 it's 1 second. And a lot of that's being driven by the other kinds of applications they run that aren't necessarily yours. So, how fast does Google run? How fast does Microsoft the web pages run? So there's all these applications they use that set that expectation. And yet, if we look at corporations, only about a quarter of the corporations, universities, and public sector enterprises out there are actually doing anything about measuring the performance from the end user perspective. So this is one of the things that we talk about a lot when we talk about EUEM, is that it is somewhat of a shift for IT to think about measuring performance from the outside in versus the inside out. But I think now, and it's going to be even more so as we move forward and the application infrastructures get more and more complicated, is that the end user performance is going to be the initial indicator of what actually happens. That's really important. One of the things that we hear, and I've read statistics that today in most organizations, their monitoring of end users is basically their help desk. Dana alluded to this. In the past, that's where end user problems were typically identified. In fact, there's a statistic that came out of that same Forrester study that says 74% of all user errors are reported to the help desk first and then escalated on to IT to figure out what the problem is. On top of that, I've read another study from EMA that basically says only about 4% of online web users will actually report a problem. So if you do the math there, which I can't do, 4% of what's left out of 74% is not very many people report errors, so there's a lot more errors going on than you actually know about. So that's why, we kind of push APM from a user standpoint, is to be able to tell how any user from anywhere on any path is actually experiencing the applications that they're running at any given point in time. So I want to drill into that just a little bit. The traditional way we think about application performance monitoring is really from the data center perspective. We've done a great job. BMC and many, many other companies have great products that can measure all of the infrastructure. So by watching the infrastructure, we can tell if the database server is running, is the web application running, is the application server running, are all the services running, how's the network doing in terms of response times. But that doesn't always cut it. And I can relate some stories here, and this kind of goes back to the survey. About a week ago, I got an email from my favorite sporting goods store. They're running a special for their elite members of their frequent buyers club, which I hate to admit I am one of, 25% off any single purchase on their website. Well, perfect timing. I needed a new pair of workout shoes. So I go on their website and I start to try to browse the inventory to look for the Under Armour shoes that I've been wanting for a long time. And as I started to browse the inventory screens, the response time was horrendous. I mean, I was getting response times that were probably 20, 30 seconds long. I gave up. And if I were to take that survey that Dick put up earlier before the webcast started, I would have said I'm one who gives up. I mean, I'm not going to do that. I mean, we've seen surveys that say bad performance is worse than a website being down in terms of brand equity and also people leaving. I bought my shoes from a brick-and-mortar store down the street because I gave up on the online store. We've seen customers like that, and what it points out is that even though probably all of their systems were working properly, we know of specific examples where customers have similar problems to that, where, for example, somebody's taken an application into production with unindexed SQL. So all of a sudden you're making 10 SQL calls where you should be making one SQL call. So even though that the monitoring of the database server says you're getting 2 millisecond response time, you're really getting more like 5-second response time from just the database. So all of a sudden performance went to really bad levels because of it really what's an application error, but all systems looked like go. And that's where measuring things from the inside out, looking from the end user perspective, begins to point out those problems beforehand. So Dana talked a lot about EUEM side of this, which is watching end user performance, and then he also talked about how it helps their application people and, in fact, their data center people. Once you know what type of error you're facing, you've got app-tier deep visibility to get to root cause analysis very quickly. So the first thing is we can isolate end user problems to what type of error is it. And then the second thing is you can drill down very quickly. So you can get down into what is the network problem, or what is the database problem, or what is the application problem. And using application diagnostics, which is actually a separate product, we do the analysis to say where is it. You can actually drill down and see the line of code that's causing the problem and help to isolate that even faster. So one of the things our users have seen is that not only does it help them increase the end user satisfaction and the performance they're seeing, but it allows them to drastically reduce the mean time to repair of an application. So they can very quickly triage to the root cause of what's the actual problem and actually get to it very quickly so they can repair it. And I'll talk about a couple of customers very specifically here in a little bit. So, Dana used some of these words, and I'll just reinforce them here. The EUEM product is real-time, real-user monitoring. So it's not a synthetic transaction. It actually is mirroring the web traffic. So this is important. I mean, Dana mentioned the fact that it's not impacting network traffic whatsoever, and that's because there's basically a passive data collector in place that's making a copy of the web traffic as it comes through. So all of the traffic that comes through is copied, and then it's run through real-time analysis as it comes through. And that lets us do some interesting things that I'll talk more about in the next slide, but we're basically able to analyze the web traffic to boil things down into user sessions and then specific transactions within those user sections. So there's some really interesting things that can happen as a result of that. And the appliance that Dana mentioned can either be a piece of hardware, it can be a virtual machine. There's lots of ways you can set this up, but in essence, we're tapping the network somewhere probably in front of the load balancer. So we're seeing real traffic making it stream into the analyzer, and then things are being captured in real time and analyzed in real time. So it's non-intrusive. It's also one of the reasons why this product can come up so quickly. Dana mentioned that, no kidding, it was up in 2 hours. I think that was the quote you said, Dana. It can be up that quickly. So you're basically capturing traffic, and you're seeing real-time results very quickly. So within days, you can get to insights that you've never seen before. So let me just talk about a few of those capabilities on this slide. So it starts with the end user. We're capturing that traffic. We're creating dynamic baselines. You saw some of the dashboards that Dana had created using this data. There's a couple of things here that are really important. One is that over time the system learns. So it kind of learns what's normal behavior for various thresholds. So here we're seeing the error levels, the speed levels, the traffic volume levels. The system learns from monitoring that traffic on an ongoing basis what's normal. And anytime things get outside of normal, you get notified. That becomes an incident or an anomaly to the system. You can also set thresholds, so regardless of what the normals are. So, Dana mentioned that they want all of their user response times to be 8 seconds, and those will get flagged if they're higher than 8 seconds. So you can begin to say, what's the problem here? Is it all think time? Do we have network latency? Do we have database server latency? Is the application too slow? So you can very quickly get to that. But one of the really important things here and why people see quick time to value is the fact that we are, in fact, creating these dynamic baselines. And so over time, as the system learns, it gets better and better at pulling out anomalies on its own and creating incident reports to say something's wrong here. The normal response time here is this, and it's now twice that. Or the error rates are higher than normal. There's a lot more content errors than we normally would see, so there's probably something wrong with the application even without you doing that. There's two other things here I'll point out on the bottom half of the screen. One is these user sessions. Dana showed you kind of monitoring specific users. By looking at the web traffic, we can actually pull out a session by user. So even though traffic is flowing in, all kinds of stuff from all different users, we can look at specific sessions for specific users. And within those, we can actually identify transactions. So in Dana's case, it may be something specifically to do with Blackboard or something specifically to do with the HR system. If you're running a web store, for example, you may want to very carefully watch the shopping cart. It may be the most important transaction to your business, so you can create a watch point. So watch points are basically they're as simple as it's just a way to set up watching anything specific, and they're not just transactions. So you can watch a locale, you can watch a specific user ID. So if you have a customer that is your most important customer, you can create a watch point and watch that customer. We have insurance companies who support certain states, and they'll set up watch points just for that user ID or anybody in that domain who's using their system, so they can determine how are they doing. And then lastly, you can do this reporting on all of those things. So from the anomaly detection, from the incidents, from the sessions, from the transactions, from the watch points, there's lots and lots of ways to set up reports, and they're very custom. And the reports themselves basically work on kind of a sort of a quick automated filter. So you have, as Dana mentioned, tons of types of data available. So you can, on the fly, very quickly create a report that basically says what's the browser mix of my current customer base? How many use Internet Explorer versus Firefox versus whatever. So there's ways to set up reports on an ongoing basis using this ton of data. So to some extent, it is a big data product dealing very specifically with end user data, and gives you a very quick way to do real time and after the fact analysis of that data.